The camera opens on a gloomy afternoon in an urban area where the streets pulse with the hum of the city. The sky is thick with clouds, and a sense of tension hangs in the air, as if the storm is just waiting to break. The camera focuses on Zara, a poised and confident black woman in her late 20s. She walks briskly down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement with a rhythm of purpose. Zara is dressed in a tailored business suit that speaks to her success and determination. Every step she takes is calculated, every move she makes purposeful. Zara, the founder and CEO of Westcorp Technologies, has just finished a high-stakes meeting and is heading to her next appointment. She's intelligent, successful, and self-assured, someone who has worked tirelessly to build a thriving business empire in the tech world. As she walks, her phone buzzes in her hand, an urgent message about an investment opportunity she's been eyeing. She glances down at the screen briefly, her thoughts consumed by the details of the deal. This could be a game changer for her company. The low rumble of distant thunder breaks her focus, the air heavy with the threat of rain. But Zara's attention shifts back to her phone when suddenly a loud screeching noise tears through the city. The sirens of a police car blare behind her, and she instinctively glances over her shoulder. The sound grows louder, and soon the car pulls up next to her. Zara doesn't immediately react, continuing her walk, thinking the officer might be after someone else. But then, a sharp voice cuts through the noise. "Ma'am, can I see your ID?" Zara stops in her tracks, her brow furrowing. Officer Richards, a middle-aged white police officer, has stepped out of his patrol car. His cold, judgmental eyes meet hers as he crosses his arms, blocking her path. Zara, a woman used to navigating spaces where she's often the only person of color, is taken aback. Something about this encounter feels different, and her instincts tell her that something isn't right. Zara looks at the officer, her confusion shifting into a quiet, composed resolve. "Why do you need my ID?" she asks, her voice calm but firm. She doesn't back down, though the air between them feels charged, as if the question itself challenges him. Officer Richards, already irritated, doesn't bother to hide his disdain. His voice is sharp and dismissive. "I just need to verify who you are," he says, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Zara maintains her gaze, her mind running through the possibilities. "I'm just walking to my car, officer. What's the issue?" she responds, her posture straight, unyielding, not giving an inch to the tension in the air. This isn't the first time she's felt this kind of scrutiny, but there's something different about this encounter. The unease creeping into her chest is palpable. She is a successful woman, a business owner who has built something of value, yet here she is, being treated like she's the one in the wrong. The silence stretches as the two stand facing each other, the street noises continuing to swirl around them, but the standoff between Zara and Officer Richards intensifies. It's not just about the ID anymore, it's about the space she occupies in the world and how others perceive her. Zara isn't backing down. She has every right to walk down the street, but she knows this interaction is about to reveal something deeper, something more insidious. Zara hands over her ID, still uneasy but trying to stay composed. Her fingers tighten around her purse strap as she watches Officer Richards take it from her with an air of superiority. He glances at her driver's license, holding it up to the light as though it's something that doesn't quite fit the image he had in mind. Zara feels the coldness of his gaze as he scrutinizes the card, his eyes flicking over her name and the details with an air of judgment. For a brief moment, she wonders if she should walk away, just leave him with his assumptions and let the interaction end. But as his condescending tone cuts through the air, she knows she can't let it slide. "I didn't think people like you belonged around here," he sneers, his voice thick with disdain. Zara's heart skips a beat. The weight of his words hangs in the air, but she refuses to let it affect her. She holds her ground, steadying her breath, and responds firmly, "I live and work here, just like anyone else." Her voice is calm, but resolute. showing no sign of backing down. The words hit harder than she expects, but Zara doesn't let them faze her. She's no stranger to discrimination. It's a part of the world she's fought against her whole life, and she's not going to let a petty officer ruin her day or define her worth. However, Officer Richards doesn't let up. His smug grin widens as he continues, clearly relishing the chance to mock her. "You're in a hurry, huh? Just another day in the life of someone like you, I bet." His words are laced with malice, and Zara feels a wave of frustration building inside her. She can feel her composure being tested, but she's determined to stay calm and not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. But things quickly take a turn for the worse. Without warning, Officer Richards abruptly yanks the ID from her hands, his grip tight and dismissive, as if her very identity is something to be discarded. He starts to inspect it with exaggerated thoroughness, as if looking for something to discredit her. Zara's eyes narrow, her pulse quickening as she realizes this isn't about her ID. It's about control. It's about the power he thinks he has over her. Her hands tremble slightly, but she doesn't let him see her discomfort. Zara knows that showing weakness in this moment could make things worse. She feels the familiar sting of anger rising in her chest, but she channels it into calm determination. She won't let him intimidate her. She won't let him make her feel small. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Officer Richards ignites a lighter, and for a moment, everything seems to slow. Zara's stomach drops as she watches the flame touch the corner of her driver's license. The smell of burning paper fills the air, and her mind races as she sees the edges of her ID curling and blackening. She watches helplessly as her name, her identity, everything that proves who she is, disintegrates in front of her eyes. The fire creeps up the corner of the card, and Zara feels her heart pound as the identity she's worked so hard to build burns away. The officer grins, watching her face with sadistic pleasure. "Let's see how you prove who you are now," he says, his voice full of mockery as the flames lick higher. The ID is melting before her, each second making her feel smaller, more powerless. Zara's chest tightens, the injustice of the moment washing over her like a tide. She takes a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm, but a rush of anger floods her veins. The world around her seems to blur. Officer Richards' smug face, the crackling sound of the burning ID, the silent witnesses watching from the sidelines. The humiliation is suffocating, but she refuses to let it defeat her. She squares her shoulders, her eyes never leaving Officer Richards as she speaks, her voice steady and clear. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone," she says, her words sharp like a whip. "I'll make sure the world knows about this." Her tone is so composed, so firm, that even Richards falters for a split second, but he quickly recovers, laughing dismissively, clearly unconcerned with the consequences of his actions. The other officers, who had been standing idly by, now exchange uneasy glances. They've been silent throughout the exchange, complicit in Richards's treatment of Zara, but now they look at her with an air of silent judgment. It's as if, in that brief moment, they too have decided she isn't worth defending. Zara stands tall, her fists clenched at her sides, though she does nothing to escalate the situation. She doesn't need to. Her resolve, her strength, and the weight of her words are enough. She has already made her point. Officer Richards and his colleagues are the ones who look small now, trapped in the web of their own ignorance and racism. But this encounter, this moment of humiliation, will not be forgotten. Zara knows she will fight back. She won't let them silence her. She won't let them control her. And one day, they'll have to answer for this. As the laughter dies down and the tension in the air lingers, the sound of a sleek black SUV pulling up to the curb cuts through the chaos. The vehicle purrs to a halt, its gleaming exterior a stark contrast to the grim scene unfolding in front of it. The camera focuses on the vehicle as the door opens, and a tall, dignified man steps out, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. His presence is commanding, almost magnetic, and immediately draws the attention of everyone in the vicinity. It's Richard Campbell, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country, though the officers have no idea who he is, yet. As Richard walks toward the scene with purposeful strides, his eyes lock onto Zara standing tall, but clearly shaken by the confrontation. The moment his gaze meets hers, a sense of calm washes over her, and she stands a little straighter. He knows exactly what has transpired, but he doesn't show it. His demeanor is cool and composed, his tone calm yet firm when he speaks. Zara, you did well today. The officers freeze, their smirks fading into uncertainty as they process the authority in Richard's voice. Officer Richards, still holding a smoldering piece of Zara's torn ID, stands there, his mouth slightly agape. The mockery they'd been indulging in now feels like a distant memory, replaced by the unease creeping into their hearts. They don't know who Richard is, but they feel the weight of his presence immediately. Richard's eyes narrow as he looks at Officer Richards, his expression hardening. "What is this?" he asks, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable force that makes Officer Richards falter. Officer Richards stumbles over his words, clearly thrown by the sudden appearance of this powerful figure. She was acting suspicious, he mutters, but his words don't hold the same confidence they had moments before. His arrogance is now replaced by uncertainty. Zara, having regained her composure, steps forward, her eyes never leaving the officers. "I am Zara West," she says, her voice clear and unwavering. CEO of Westcorp Technologies, and one of the most successful women in tech. She lets the words hang in the air, making sure the officers hear the gravity of her identity. The silence stretches as they try to process what she's just said. The moment is pregnant with the realization that the situation has just shifted, dramatically. Zara doesn't let the pause linger too long, her face hardening with quiet resolve as she continues. "I am also the one who funds and oversees multiple police reform initiatives in this city. I've been working with the government to address systemic racial issues and improve police accountability. I've been involved in funding community programs that help prevent situations like this." Her words are calculated, but they carry the weight of someone who has been working tirelessly behind the scenes, affecting change, even when the system seemed impossible to penetrate. The officers stand frozen, unable to respond, now fully aware of the depth of the mistake they've made. Zara looks at them now, her gaze unwavering and fierce. "I've been trying to improve things for people just like you. I've been working to make sure that nobody has to go through this kind of treatment. But now, you've crossed a line." At that moment, Richard turns to face the officers, his expression shifting to one of disgust. His voice drops, carrying a sharp edge that pierces the air. "You've just humiliated my granddaughter in public," he says, his tone chilling. "You mocked her for trying to help this child, and now you've gone so far as to destroy her identity. Do you even know who you've been speaking to, officer?" The words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of realization. The officers stand frozen, unable to speak, their faces slowly draining of color as they realize the gravity of their actions. Officer Richards, who had once been so quick to belittle Zara, is now shaking, his earlier bravado shattered beyond repair. The officers who had been standing by, complicit in the injustice, now lower their heads in shame. Zara, who had stood tall throughout the encounter, now feels the weight of her victory. The fight isn't over, but this moment feels like a significant step forward. Richard Campbell turns back to her with a look of admiration. "You've shown incredible strength today, Zara. You didn't let them break you, and that's what matters." Zara nods slightly, though her gaze never wavers from the officers. "I'm not going to let them, or anyone, take my dignity away from me," she says quietly, but her voice rings with the finality of someone who knows her worth. She may have faced challenges, but today she stands victorious. As the officers stand there, their shame and embarrassment palpable, Richard Campbell's words resonate in the air. "This isn't over. We'll be addressing this with the department. You've not only disrespected my granddaughter, but you've also made a mockery of the very systems you're supposed to protect." He turns away, leading Zara with him, as the officers stand in stunned silence. The camera pulls back, capturing the image of Zara and Richard walking away together, their backs turned on the officers who have been caught in their own web of ignorance. The officers are left standing there, their silence speaking volumes as they begin to grasp the enormity of the mistake they've made. Zara's head is held high as she walks beside Richard, her resolve unwavering. The injustice of the situation is clear, but so is the message. They will not be silenced, and they will make sure that these actions don't go unchecked. The scene fades to black as the sound of their footsteps echoes, signifying that change is coming, one step at a time. The tension between the officers and Zara deepens as Richard Campbell's voice cuts through the heavy silence. His words are firm, each one carrying the weight of his authority. "You owe my granddaughter an apology, and I want it done publicly. This behavior is not acceptable, and there will be consequences for it." His gaze turns to Zara, and he places a reassuring hand on her shoulder, offering a sense of support and solidarity. His voice softens as he addresses her directly. "Zara, what they did today will not be tolerated. I will make sure of it." Zara looks up at Richard, the anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. The burn of humiliation from moments ago still smolders within her, but she stands tall, her back straight, and her eyes unwavering. Her voice, though calm, rings out with unyielding strength. "This isn't just about me," she says, her words measured but powerful. "It's about the countless others you've treated like this, the ones who haven't been lucky enough to have a family that can help them. I'm speaking for them, too. It's time you learned that we're done being silenced, done being degraded for no reason other than the color of our skin." Her words land with a quiet force, reverberating in the stillness around them. Officer Richards, his face pale and drawn, can't find a response. The weight of his actions has fully dawned on him, and the smugness that had once colored his tone has evaporated. Officer Harris, standing next to him, avoids making eye contact, his posture stiff as he shifts uncomfortably from one foot to the other. Zara's eyes never leave them as she continues. "It's not just about me, either. It's about every black man, woman, and child who's been treated as less than, who's been humiliated, belittled, and diminished. You see us as a threat, but we're here to show you that we're more than that. We're the ones making change, creating opportunities, and shaping the future." Her words hang in the air, filling the space with an undeniable truth. The officers, once so sure of themselves, are now painfully aware of the shift in power. Richard's presence, combined with Zara's fierce determination, has completely altered the dynamics of the moment. The officers stand awkwardly, shifting their weight, their eyes darting from one another, as if looking for a way to navigate the uncomfortable situation. They were in control just moments ago, but now they're caught in the ripple of their own actions. The silence stretches, and Richard's unyielding stare only makes it worse. After what feels like an eternity, Officer Richards clears his throat, attempting to salvage some shred of dignity. We didn't know who she was," he mutters, though his words lack conviction. His earlier arrogance is nowhere to be found, replaced instead by a nervous tremor in his voice. Richard doesn't allow the officer to continue. "You didn't know, but you assumed," he says, his voice cold and biting. "That assumption led to an unjust treatment of my granddaughter. That assumption led to an abuse of power, and it's time you recognize the consequences." The officers glance at each other, unsure how to proceed. They know they've crossed a line, but the reality of their error, the error of treating Zara like a criminal simply based on her appearance, has yet to sink in fully. Officer Richards opens his mouth to speak again, but the words falter before he can make them. What could he say? There is nothing left to justify his actions. Zara steps forward now, no longer backing down. She stands before them, a voice of strength, a beacon of dignity. This is the moment, she declares, when things change. You may not see it today, but you'll learn. You'll learn to respect every individual, no matter their skin color or background. You'll learn to question your biases before acting on them. And you will understand that your authority is not a weapon to wield against those you deem less than. Her eyes lock onto the officers, and there's a quiet resolve in her gaze that makes them look away, unable to meet the intensity of her words. Richard steps forward, his presence still commanding. I trust you'll reflect on this moment, because the way you've treated Zara and others like her is unacceptable, and from now on, there will be accountability. The officers remain silent, their heads bowed in shame. They stand there, humbled by the truth of Zara's words, realizing that the weight of their actions has finally caught up with them. As Richard and Zara turn to leave, there's a palpable shift in the air, a sense that this encounter, though difficult, is the beginning of something much larger. Zara's face is hard, but there's also a flicker of hope in her eyes. This moment, as painful as it is, has given her something that's been missing for far too long, the power to stand up, not just for herself, but for everyone who's been wrongly treated, disregarded, and judged. The camera pans out as they walk away from the officers, their figures growing smaller against the backdrop of the city. The officers remain where they stand, still processing what they've just witnessed, the end of their comfort, the beginning of a reckoning. The scene fades, leaving the sound of Zara's footsteps echoing in the distance, a reminder that this moment will not be forgotten. The story of injustice and accountability continues, and this chapter, one of strength, courage, and change, marks the beginning of something powerful. The video cuts to a few days later, and the atmosphere is completely different. News outlets across the city buzz with headlines about the police misconduct involving Officer Richards. The story of Zara's treatment and the resulting fallout has gone viral. Social media is flooded with support for her, and her name becomes a symbol of strength, dignity, and resilience. Richard Campbell's influence ensures that the officers are held accountable for their actions. The police department, under mounting pressure, is forced to take action. They issue a formal public apology to Zara, acknowledging their mistake and vowing to do better in the future. A new policy is introduced within the police department. It demands better training for officers, especially regarding racial profiling, respect for citizens' rights, and understanding the communities they serve. The department vows to implement more rigorous vetting procedures and to address bias within their ranks. This policy is a direct result of Zara's courage in standing up to the injustice she faced. As Zara sits in her office looking out the window, she reflects on the past few days. Her voiceover begins, resonating with calm authority. Sometimes it takes a stand to remind people of what's right. Change happens when we demand it, and we won't let injustice slide anymore. Our voices matter, and no matter how small the act, it can ripple across the world. The camera shifts to Zara, now back in her office, with a sense of quiet confidence. She is the same woman who was once humiliated in the street, but now she stands taller, no longer just an observer, but a force driving change. Her business, her efforts in the tech world, and her work in community advocacy are all flourishing. The events of the past few days haven't just changed the course of her own life. They've ignited a movement, one that others are beginning to follow. The screen transitions to Zara walking confidently into an important meeting, her head held high. The room she enters is filled with well-dressed business people, but as she steps in, all eyes turn toward her. Her presence fills the space, her strength undeniable. Zara knows that her voice has made a difference, that she has fought not just for herself, but for everyone who has faced similar injustices. She holds the power now, and with it, she is building something bigger than just herself. The final shot shows Zara standing at the head of the table in the meeting room, poised and composed. As she begins to speak, the camera zooms in on her face. There's no hesitation, only purpose. It's a new chapter in her life, one where she no longer fears speaking out, where she has control over her narrative. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience with a powerful message about justice, accountability, and the importance of fighting for what's right. The words linger, echoing in the minds of those watching. Change starts with us, and it's time we take a stand. This is more than just the end of one story. It's the beginning of a movement, a call to action, and a reminder that fighting for justice can and will change the world.